situation list of resources included inside that are focused on Prince Edward County. And then this one, the training and business program, a training program for local businesses. And this is where I can come and speak to you about the things that are outlined inside the pamphlet, but I can also design training specific to your agents, your business, or I can come and sit with you and talk to you about policy and practice and how your business operates to support you supporting your workers. Because one of the things that we do know from research that's been conducted by Statistics Canada is that 81.6% of people who are experiencing intimate partner violence will let somebody at work know, be that a coworker or HR or their boss or what have you. So workplaces are actually a really important place for intervention around intimate partner violence. So that's a very long intro of stuff. Let's, come on, move forward, my friend. There we go. So the agenda, an introduction to us, a discussion of gender-based violence, an exploration of why it matters to you, and an examination of what you can do. So I've done it. What do? We do counseling. We have counselors who work specifically on addressing the issues of violence against women. So helping women to interpret their own experiences of the violence that they have been living with, whether that is physical violence, sexual violence, emotional violence, financial violence. There's a number of different ways in which people who are controlling other people exert their power over. Then we have a rural outreach worker who does basically the same thing, but she also does outreach into the parts of the county where it's harder to get into Picton to come to our offices. And she will be doing events. She'll be attending things like community suppers, but she also will go out to a location, say Cressy or Consacon, to meet with somebody who might not be able to get into Picton, or who would rather have a face-to-face conversation than a conversation by telephone. Then there's our transitional counselor who is tied into the transitional housing program. So transitional housing refers to longer-term housing for people who have left a bad situation, whether that's homelessness or violence or whatever. Transitional housing is kind of a generic term to refer to longer-term housing. We don't have emergency shelter in Prince Edward County. So what we do instead is we provide transportation and referrals. So if a woman calls us and needs to get out right now, we will give her referrals to the emergency shelters in the region. She'll give them a call. She secures a bed. We make sure that she can get from where she is to that bed. So whether that's Three Oaks in Belleville, Red Cedars on Tyendinaga territory, perhaps Interval House in Napanee, we will make sure that she gets from where she is to that place. The transitional housing program is not just the housing. It's the counseling that is done with the transitional counselor, as well as working to maintain a calm, safe, violence-free environment in the building where we have our units. So we all know bad neighbors can sometimes disrupt our lives. Women who are in transitional housing are at various points in their journey. And so we work through the program to support those women in not disrupting one another's place in the journey, but also in helping them to understand sometimes how to live alone. We have a client who came to us later in life, probably somewhere in the average age zone of what I'm looking at here, including myself. And she'd never lived alone before. So how do you live alone? Or if you struggle to understand things like getting your internet connections or wandering through the various bits of bureaucracy that are required in order to set up a home, our transitional housing program helps women develop those skills. And then training and public engagement, which is me. And I have sort of 4 main pillars: volunteer coordination, community speaks like this one, workshop delivery and development. So that's kind of like that training for businesses that I spoke about, but I can also do it for any kind of organization. So if you don't run a business, or you don't know someone who runs a business who might benefit from my help, then, you know, maybe you're part of an organization other than the Rotary, or maybe who knows? The Rotary probably has really good policy and practice, but we can always improve. And having an eye look across everything, who knows? So that kind of thing. That's what I do in that sort of workshop coordination pillar. And then youth outreach, which I've been making some small inroads in reaching out to youth in Prince Edward County, working with the school and working with Discover Youth at the library. And I am working to make better connections at the Rock and the kinds of things. I'm hoping to talk to Girl Guides. I really hope to talk to soccer kids at some point. I'm happy to talk to anyone, and I can talk to them at their level. So if we're talking about kids, red flags and green flags, those can be within a family relationship or within a friendship. Is this person actually a good friend to me? Do I have a healthy relationship with this friend? Do they make fun of me in front of other people? Do they make me do all the work? Well, maybe that's not a healthy friendship. And those patterns can help kids know how to also have healthier, intimate relationships. How we do it. We do it embedded in our values, which is feminist, anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and from an intersectional point of view. I have taught entire courses on just that little square. So I'm not going to go into it in a great deal of detail, but what is important to understand here is that feminism is about making sure that everybody lives their life with respect and dignity, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of class origin, regardless of religion, regardless of all the ways in which we can be different from one another. We add the labels anti-racist and anti-oppressive to draw attention to the fact that feminism hasn't always worked to the benefit of all people. It has sometimes worked to the benefit of white people over other people. It has sometimes worked to the benefit of the bourgeoisie, the sort of upper middle class white people rather than all people. So we talk about anti-racist and anti-oppression. And then when we talk about intersectionality, what we're talking about is you can't just say, for instance, I'll take myself. I'm a white queer woman from an upper middle class background who is downwardly mobile. I am that all the time. That is how I am. My sisters, who are also white, upper middle class, not queer women, blah, 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 blah. They're not all downwardly mobile. Some of them have hidden disabilities, so that is their particular intersection point. And we need to look at how all of those things intersect, but also support one another. Because when you're disabled and Black, ableism operates differently. When you are Black and a man, masculinity is different than when you're white and a man. So that's what intersectionality is about. The how we do it also is about ensuring that we are non-judgmental, open, avoid moralizing, empathetic, patient. We believe survivors. And this is really key because very often survivors have been led to believe by their abusive partner that they don't know what they're talking about, that they have been making stuff up, that that's not what really happened. Gaslighting is a very common tactic within abusive relationships. So it's about believing survivors to empower them, because once they feel seen and heard, they will be more able to take action for themselves, supporting themselves. And then we ensure safety and security. Some of it's just about the physical security, maintaining confidentiality, privacy, anonymity, all of that kind of stuff, which can sometimes be tough in a small town, which is part of why we have a rural outreach worker and we have a place where you can park around behind the building because everybody knows everybody's car and I saw you parked in front of. So that kind of stuff. Our principal problem when we're talking about intimate partner violence is gender-based violence. And really quickly, what gender-based violence is any kind of violence, physical, sexual, digital, all of the types of violence that is enacted against a person on the basis of gender relations and gender power relationships. So very often it is against women, but it can also be against effeminate boys, or it can be against all boys, because when you were a boy, when you are a boy, you are supposed to be manly, be a man, suck it up, walk it off. And that kind of stuff can be really, really damaging, regardless of what gender you were assigned at birth. So as you can see, some of the negative impacts, we have research that demonstrates that because of our societally developed norms around what it means to be a man, many men are suffering mental and physical health consequences because of a lack of touch. A failure to be regularly touched by others is damaging to you. Also, hyper-individualism is kind of hard to maintain. And human beings are social creatures, and we ought to be social creatures, and we ought to support one another. And when we do, we tend to thrive. I could go on again, taught entire courses on this one. What's the connection between intimate partner violence and gender-based violence? Basically, that all relationships, friendships, parental to child relationships, etc., have power dynamics. And sometimes in those relationships, the power dynamics are nice and balanced, and sometimes they aren't. And gender can be a reason why power dynamics are out of balance. I have to see what I've got coming up next because I can't remember. Yeah, so gender can be a foundation of power imbalance, much like race or how much money you have or where you live or that kind of stuff. And because our society has these sort of cultural norms around patriarchy and what we call heteronormativity, we have these cultural norms whereby men typically do better than women. And men typically get to have the last say. And typically we think of everybody as straight until proven otherwise. That's why gay people have to come out and straight people don't. Have you ever thought about when you decided to be straight? Right? So heteronormativity lives. And so does patriarchy. And these things can get in the middle of an intimate relationship, no matter how hard the partners try to disrupt them. Because like when my brother-in-law took his parental leave, everybody in the office mocked him. When my sister took her parental leave, everybody was like, you're going to take the full year? Why aren't you coming back in 3 weeks? Why aren't you coming back in 3 months? So there's this very weird dynamic that goes on, and we need to think about how gender relations play out largely across all kinds of relationships, because the typical relationship in intimate partnerships is a straight relationship. So even though we have intimate partner violence in same-sex relationships, the gender dynamics may still play out, even though there is not that one's the woman and one's the man, but rather that the way we know how to do relationships is to do a straight relationship. So trying to figure out how to do a relationship when your only model is one that is already embedded in gender relations is a bit messy, and not everybody gets it right. So how does this affect us in Prince Edward County? We provide services to roughly 100 women a year. In 2022, 2023, we provided transitional housing to 14 women and nine children. We know that sexual assault and sexual harassment are on the rise at Prince Edward Collegiate. Last year, Victim Services had 90 calls for Prince Edward County, 55 of them. So a large majority of them were for intimate partner violence. The OPP 8-year rolling average for IPV calls is 256 annually. So 256 out of 365, that's getting awful close to one a day. We know that rural women are 75% more likely to experience intimate partner violence than urban women. And this is so well understood by our community leaders that intimate partner violence and sexual violence are a pillar of our community safety and well-being plan. Why should it matter to you personally? Living one's life free from harm is a universal human right. So if you care about human rights, you care about intimate partner violence. We also know that we can make change in the culture of our society. The Domestic Violence Death Review Committee of the Office of the Chief Coroner of Ontario has identified 41 risk factors. We know when somebody is about to get murdered, when they're in a situation of intimate partner violence. That means we can predict and make change and save a life. But we can also do things to take down some of those risk factors, because some of those risk factors are living in a home with strictly enforced gender roles. If that is not the norm, if that is not the way that everybody goes, oh, it's a great way to live your life. If everybody's kind of like, maybe that's not the best way to live your life, then that one risk factor stops being such a central part of anyone's life. And so then we are diminishing what's going on. And it's really important. This graphic can sort of look like, when I look at it, I simultaneously think, wow, that's over the top. And wow, that's minimizing the reality. And the truth is, research demonstrates that this is actually how things work. That when societies, when cultures are more forgiving of jokes that belittle others, then it is more likely that that's a society in which there are higher levels of harassment and assault of those people who have been belittled. And when a society has a high level of harassment and assault, there is a higher chance of, and up the pyramid we go. So it's important to remember that in some ways it should matter to you because you don't want to be part of a society that makes it okay that every 6 days in Canada, a woman is murdered by her intimate partner or former intimate partner. Every 6 days, more than one a week. I don't want to live in that society. And you're opening, oh, I wish I could remember what you called it, that was spoken so eloquently about bringing people into Rotary. Yeah, the invocation. Your invocation says, let's make the world a better place. Well, hey, I'm here to help you make the world a better place. Let's make Canada a place where that's no longer a statistic that I have to keep repeating about one woman every 6 days. What can you do? Self-reflection. Make some changes in yourself. What are you going to do when you walk out of here? You going to tell anybody about this conversation? Are you going to take up one of my pamphlets and give me a call? Are you going to, like, I don't know. What are you going to do? And when you see, one of the things that women have been saying for the past couple of decades, but more loudly in the last decade, is when men see other men behaving badly, it's safer for a man to tell that man who is behaving badly to stop behaving badly. And very often that behaving badly happens behind closed doors where women are not there. So women can't do anything about the men who behave badly in the locker room because we're not there to go, oh, come on, Jim, that joke isn't funny. Or, oh, come on, Bob, explain to me how that joke is funny. We can't do that. So we can make changes in our everyday interactions, which luckily makes changes to our culture. And that's super important because we need to think about all three, because the triangle of oppression is this teaching tool that we use all the time in equity and diversity studies. But what it basically is telling us is that individuals, institutions, and ideologies are all at play in anything that happens in society. So if you want to make a change anywhere, you kind of have to be working on all 3 points of the triangle to actually shift stuff. And if you don't, you can't. So what can you do? You can ask me some questions and we can have a discussion, and we're good to go.